Oh my god, what am I doing? Hi, welcome to Just Thinking Out Loud. I'm Desi-Rae. The steps that it has taken me to finally get around to making this video are incredible. I know it's been a delay, and that's because I went to the conference, International Conference on Men's Issues, ICMI, and then my friend, who I hadn't seen in about 10 years, although we did occasionally communicate through the internet, came to visit, and I was thoroughly distracted for a couple days. And I was also just recuperating from the conference before then. So I hadn't found the time to make a video. And although I do have some content that I could have released, I just decided against it. So I promised a certain organizer at ICMI that I would make a video talking about my experience. I won't say who it is, but you might be able to figure it out if you watch some of the content that they put out. So ICMI stands for the International Conference on Men's Issues. In a video a couple months ago, I told you guys that I would be speaking at two places, and this was one of them. So it's a conference on men's issues. There were a lot of men's rights activists there, and I'm not a men's rights activist, but I do speak about certain things. Like I don't really like most of the gender discussions that go on culturally, trying to help women generally exclusive to women and not also helping men. So I don't like that. And I also, there's specific topics that don't just affect men, but the way that they are portrayed in the mainstream media is as if it only affects women and not both men and women. So I kind of talk about that as well. So I had a speech. It went okay. There were some technical issues at the beginning, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to upload the video on my own channel, but I will if I can. Plus, I will also link you to the video that's going to be put out by the Honey Badgers once it's out. And then I also had a panel. I had a panel with Sargon of Akkad / Carl Benjamin, and also Count Dankula / Marcus. That was very cool. It was called Get Woke, Grow Broke. The Quartering was supposed to have been on the panel, but he didn't end up being on there due to some complications. But I did find out that he was the person that coined that term, which I didn't know before. I also met these people, and that's probably the biggest thing I'm going to talk about. I met a lot of cool people, including Sargon and Dankula, and then there was a Quartering. I also met Aiden Paladin, who I thought was very cool. I went to her speech, and I met Karen Strawn. That was awesome. And I met Brian Martinez, who is part of the Honey Badgers, and he's the person that was really the link for me even attending this, because I have done some live streams with him before, 2 to be exact, or it might have been 3. And he was like, do you want to come? And I was like, yes, I'll be on a panel. And then he was like, do you want to speak? And I was like, yes, I do. My speech, to be specific, was on, the title was Double Standards and the Lens of Identity, and I think that pretty much sums it up. And I basically argue the position that I normally have when I'm talking about anything on my channel when it comes to identity, which is we should stop framing everything through identity. And that I don't like the double standards when we do decide to frame things through identity. I didn't just meet these people in a work quote unquote context, but also we hung out, like casually, and that was a lot of fun. I did also meet some of my subscribers, and that was cool. And I always say this whenever I bring this up, but talking to people in person is very different from talking to them like online. And I think for some people, for one thing, you only see this part of me when I'm making my videos, and you interact with me like in person, which is different. And for some people, when I was hearing their voice like right beside me, it's so interesting that it's not coming out of your phone or your computer speakers, but you're talking to them directly. So that was really cool. Something else that was interesting was that the hotel was getting calls from the press or just from people who are not happy with the conference being held there. It was very peaceful. It was just people giving their opinions. A couple talks that I went to that were interesting were one on fathers and speaking about the biology behind the development of children when fathers were present or absent. And I kind of knew some of that already, but that was very interesting. I can't remember the speaker's name. It was a guy. And I also really liked Aiden Paladin's talk. And she was talking about birth control and how I think it was 85% or 85.1%, I can't remember the exact number, of women in the US have at some point been on birth control, and it affects who they mate with, and that might have and once the hormones wear off, then a lot of times women don't want to be with the partner that they had chosen before, and so that might have an effect on family breakdown that we see in society. So that was one of my favorite talks. It was very sciencey, but that was one of my favorite talks. Other talks that I thought were interesting. Oh, I met someone named Sonia Schmidt, who you may have heard of before, and she was talking about the decline of the Black family in particular from a perspective I'd never heard of before. And she apparently used to work in Hollywood. She's quite humorous and witty. She had a bit of a clash with Tommy Sotomayor, who I also met, and that was quite interesting. I won't say what it was about, but I really enjoyed her very touching story. So I think those were sort of the highlights. Let me see if there's anything else I can think of. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the hotels getting calls, because I went up to the front desk to ask them to let me check out as late as possible. And she was like, no, it was a guy. It was a man who was asking me if I'm a speaker at the conference because you had these yellow lanyards. And I said yes. And then he was asking me what it was about. And I was like, oh, it's a conference on men's issues. And he was like, what does that mean? And I said, oh, they talk about certain things like, say, false rape cases, false rape accusations, or circumcision, stuff like that. And he was like, oh. And then I was like, why? And he was like, oh, we've been getting some calls. And I was like, oh, really? And he was like, yeah. I mean, he actually didn't seem that upset. He was just like, oh, I see. And then there was this woman who was very friendly with me at the beginning. And I think that later on she might have been acting a bit differently towards it, because maybe now they realize what was really happening at the conference. So that happened. I did not, unfortunately, get to go to the gun range, which is something I really wanted to do, but that didn't happen. I guess I just put that in there. That was something that happened. And there was a lot of time spent in an arcade with some people. Oh, and there was also a cool guy named Brian who started a band called Elite Vitria, and he was giving out previews on a USB stick. So you could look them up. It's ELITE space FITREA. I thought the music was very good. I was honestly not expecting it to be quite good, but then I listened to it and I was like, oh wow, this is really good, and this isn't really my kind of music, and I thought it was very, very good. So I guess I'm just giving him a shout out because he was cool. And apparently, I think they say, the band members were in prison for a long time, and I think that their music in some ways sort of reflects that. And it's supposed to be music with a political cause behind it, sort of about the culture wars of today's time. But like, even if you didn't know any of that, the music itself sounds interesting. I'm not sure what I would classify it as. I'm not good at that. So that was cool. That was my experience with ICMI. It was really cool. I learned some things, and I felt like even though you wouldn't think that what I had to say would correlate directly, I think my message sort of fits in there. I really appreciate the invite, and I hope to have to do it again in the future, depending on where it is, because it's actually international, so it won't be in the US next year. And one more thing I want to say before I go is that give you a bit of a channel update. I start school in about 2 days, and so I'm not making any promises on what my content will be like, but just be aware. I guess this is a heads up. I don't think it will be the way it was my last semester, where I made like 2 videos a month. So just letting you know that that's also happening. Okay, Now I'm gonna go make some other kind of more thoughtful content. Okay, have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. This is just an update. So yeah, don't forget to support the channel. There are links, and my usual shill of just thinking out loud.tv/donate. Okay, bye.